Welcome to Thriving Purposefully with me, Jocelyn. Today, I have one of the most influential people in my life that I met this year. She is a money-saving queen. I have experienced her work firsthand. I started off 2023 in debt and engaging in money moves that were not getting me any closer to my goals. We started working together around March, and since then, not only have we worked on my money mindset, bringing awareness to where my money was going and ways I was spending, but also building habits that were aligned with how I wanted to relate to money and how I wanted money to work for me. And that alone was a massive mindset shift. I'm ending the year with zero debt, a fully funded Roth IRA, and an HYSA account that has my money working for me. Without further ado, I want to thank Yesenia for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Got teary-eyed. Thank you for that
Aww.
beautiful introduction.
Absolutely. We were emailing just a little bit ago, and I was just so excited. Like, the money wins I have had this past year are unbelievable, and we'll get into those later, but I would love if you could tell the listeners a little bit more about you and the work that you do.
So my name is Yesenia Godoy, and I am a money coach, and I help women go from feeling like they're living paycheck to paycheck, feeling stuck in the cycle of debt, to feeling confident with their money decisions so that they can do the things they want to do, spend their money on the experiences that they want to experience, buy the things that they want, and not feel restricted. And I think that's a gift, right? To give yourself is that feeling of knowing that you're making money decisions with confidence and knowing that those are the right decisions, not only for your present self, but also for your future self. Because I think that's what a lot of our spending habits sometimes don't take into account. It's like, how will this affect future me?
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that. I love it so much. And so what really drew me into the work that you do, aside from being stuck and living paycheck to paycheck and fed up with how I felt and how I was relating to money, was hearing your story and your money journey. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Of course. So I grew up very poor. My family and I immigrated from Mexico to the US when I was 4. And we didn't have a lot in Mexico. And we were a little bit better off here, but we were still way below the poverty level. Like, everything we owned, we were in a rental house, like a 1-bedroom house. Everything we owned was secondhand, which there's nothing wrong with secondhand, but it wasn't a choice, right? It was because we had to. It was the clothes, the toys, the beds, everything was either from like a garage sale or a thrift store. And I wasn't really aware that I was poor. I didn't feel poor until I started school here in the US. And the kids made it known. They made me very aware of how poor I was from, in elementary school, pointing out how I wore a shirt a lot, right? Like, oh, is that the only shirt you have? And of course, in middle and high school, there was a big focus on wearing name brand clothing and shoes, none of which I could afford, right? So I think that's the point when I realized, oh, maybe we're poor. And then as we got into middle and high school, you started seeing the low income people that were getting the free or the low cost lunches. So you saw a big difference there. And also, with being like the oldest child of an immigrant family, ended up doing a lot of the translating and interpreting, which meant I was super involved in every single aspect of our family's lives, right? From like legal to educational to medical, but that also included how we managed money. And while this was a lot of responsibility, and looking back at it now, I'm thinking, wow, I was so young, making very important, maybe not decisions, but definitely interpreting and translating things that were life-changing. but it taught me a lot because I got really good at translating and interpreting from English to Spanish and vice versa. I even considered that as a career. And then one of the most important things that it taught me was the importance of savings and living within my means. And my parents, especially my mom, they didn't believe in loans or credit cards. They always told me, like, if you bought anything on a credit card, on a loan, on borrowed money, like it wasn't ever really yours and it could be taken away any moment. Like, and it went to the extent, even for them, of their homes. If they didn't buy homes they couldn't afford cash, which meant, the homes they could afford cash weren't like great places to live or nice or anything. Um, but these skills and this experience, while hard, and I think it also served me well, especially those skills I learned as I transitioned into adulthood, because then I knew how to live within my means at all my income levels. So from the time, from the part-time jobs that I had while I was going through college, also the waitressing jobs that I did whenever I was on school break. And so after I graduated college and when I started making even more money, I started saving even more. And it was so much so, I got so good at it that by the time that my husband and I were looking to buy a house, I was able to buy it cash. Like I had saved up
But
enough cash to buy our
yeah,
first home. And it
the
wasn't,
whole like that is
yeah, yeah,
massive.
a whole ass house.
The
Um,
whole that's so impressive and amazing and keep going. Sorry. I just
yes.
it'll never get old. A whole house. It's cash.
Yeah, and it was a
Like you
fixer upper and it was in such terrible condition that, I had my little notebook that I would bring to all the houses we would look at. And I wrote on that one, hell no, with like 10 exclamation points. But my husband
and
had
you
a
put
vision for it and he convinced me of his vision. And I'm glad he did because we fixed it up. Together, we were able to fix it up. Both, we did a lot of the work ourselves and then also using money, right? Like both of us contributing financially to it. And 6 years later, we were able to sell it for more than we bought and had invested in it. So we made a profit and then we moved to our home state. So we had moved to the East Coast, but we moved to our home state and built our dream home and paid for it cash and bought our dream pickup truck and paid for it cash. And so now that's where I'm living now. And so I think that just those skills, I didn't even realize it until around the time we talked, Joss. Like I didn't realize that it wasn't normal for people to save a lot of money and to buy things. I just because it was
right.
so standard, it was just the norm growing up.
Yeah.
And also, my parents were like, "Don't talk about money. Like, don't tell people how much money you have, and don't tell people how much money you don't have." And so I didn't know what people's financial situations were like, um, but it just enabled me not only to do that, but I think one thing that I don't talk about enough that's super important, is that I was able to save up enough money to build a runway to quit my 9 to 5. Had I not had those spending habits and been managing my money the way I did, I would not have been able to take the step that I took to quit my 9 to 5 and dedicate my heart and soul to do what I love with my business, which is to coach people, to help them achieve their goals, to help them achieve their dreams so that they can, live their best lives. And I think that had I not had those spending habits, I don't know. I'm not a big risk taker. So I don't know that I would have quit my 9 to 5 without having that runway of several months of money that I saved up so that I wouldn't have to worry about immediately, because building a business takes time.
Yes. Yeah. It definitely does. And you, with your habits, were able to create, a life that you actually wanted to be living.
Yes. I think that's
That's
the
a
other thing. And I hadn't thought about this. Um, it's true. I live the life that I want to live. I get up, I start my day at a leisurely pace. I
Mhm.
hang out with my dog, right? I really do what I want. I also love to travel, so I go to the places I want to go to. Earlier this year, I went to Michigan to meet a bunch of my online entrepreneur friends. So my business besties, right? They're not part of my business, but they have their own businesses. I'm going to go visit one of them in Ecuador next year. So it's like money. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, money isn't everything and you shouldn't be too money focused." And I understand that. Like I'm not here to say like, "Oh, let me buy these name brand things and let me show you how much money I have." I think that just money just enables you to have more freedom, freedom of time, autonomy, making deciding what you want to do with your time. That's huge.
It's massive. Yes, absolutely. Um, Taking a few steps back to something you said, um, you mentioned that you didn't realize other people like don't save and that your saving habits was like probably unique to you. I also have a saving story, and I think I've shared this with you in the past, but it has a very different outcome than yours. And I think it's worth sharing because well, I'll let the conversation play out as it plays out. But my story is I had saved up, I think, about $30,000 with no rhyme or reason. I was just like saving, like transferring from my checkings to my savings account every paycheck, and that was growing. And it finally one day it said 30K, and I was like, whoa, that's cool. And then you know what I did? Well, I'm sure you could guess.
You spent
I
it?
spent it all. I spent every single dollar, and I can't even tell you. Well, I can tell you one of the things I remember. I invested in a business coach, but aside from that, like I can't tell you where the other dollars went, and there was a lot.
Yes.
And so it really like the way that we now work together, and that's kind of what I want to get to um, next is how you work with clients, and if you can give more insight on that, because one of the first things that we talked about once we started working together was where different ways we can start to look at money, and the way that kind of stuck out to me was giving every dollar a job, and that was like revolutionary for me because my money had never been given a job. I didn't know where any of it was going other than, the clothing stores and probably skincare products, things like that, or groceries and food. Probably lots of sushi dates with David. But like it was very much, just swiping because that's the habit I had. And so when we then started to look at, okay, well, let's give every dollar a job, it was really hard for me to think that way. And we worked through that. And I think there's been quite a few of those moments throughout the months we've been working together where I tell you, "Hey, can you tell me that again? Can you like what is that? Can you walk me through it because I just don't understand." And so really thinking about money differently is a really big thing that you and I have worked on. But on a bigger scale, how do you work with clients to really get the results that we were talking about at the very beginning, where my financial situation is the complete opposite than what I started off in January of 2023.
Wow. Yeah. So I think two things from what you mentioned. One, I think it's really important when you're saving, and I think they're related. So they're definitely related. When you're saving, to know what you're saving for, right? And so now you're in the situation where you know what you're saving for. You know what every dollar in your savings account, what you're saving that for. I think that is huge, which speaks also to like giving every dollar a job. Because a lot of people save money and then spend it and turn around and spend it. Um, that's huge. And then in terms of like money mindset, I think that how we view money and how we interact with our money and our finances, it's essentially the foundation to our spending habits and our behaviors around money. And much of our mindset and beliefs around money, which I shared in my story, and as many other aspects of our lives, are linked to our childhood and impacted by our childhood experiences. So whether we had money growing up or not, and also that we take on the money beliefs of our parents or caretakers. And so how they relate to money is likely how we relate to money on some level. And even if they never talked about money, that we take those things in and we make them mean something. And so
Yes.
what that yeah.
I'd like to kind of stay there for a little bit
Yeah.
because you and I have had that conversation in the past about our childhoods and growing up. And so I was born in California to immigrant parents. And so I relate to your story in some aspects where um, some of the money habits, whether they were spoken of, actually they weren't because it was very taboo, and it kind of still is when it comes to talking about money with my parents. And it's something. Obviously, I'm on a podcast now talking about money, and so it's different now as I relate to it. But growing up. Money wasn't really talked about, or it was talked about and it was said that we didn't have any. So we just don't have money. But then if I like did a really good job at school or got really good grades, like I was rewarded with going to the store and buying stuff. So that was confusing for me because while I would overhear the adults saying, we don't have money, and then I call my mom and I'm like, hey, I like aced my spelling bee test. Can we go to CVS and buy a binder? And she'd be like, yeah, I'll be home at this time and then we'll go. And then we would go. And it wasn't like it was like the fancy binder with like the cloth cover and all the gadgets and stuff. And so I don't know what the price was, back in the early 2000s, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't the cheapest binder there. But they had a smile on their face and they were, excited. And I get that. And, being able to provide for your children in a different way. Right now, I think I'm just focusing on the fact that there was two very different ways of talking about money and then the actions that were surrounding money. And so as an adult, it's I was just like swipe happy. I was like, oh, I just got paid. Let me go. Like I can
Celebrate.
see the money I have. Let me go celebrate. Or what? Yeah, I think a lot of my spending has to do with celebrating, or even the opposite, or it would be, I'm not feeling very good. I want to go to the store and walk around. And it wasn't just walking around, it was that dopamine hit of like, what sales can I find? And like the super sales, like this is on like 70% off. Oh my gosh, what a deal. And then it just sits in my closet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of all over the place because I also want to talk about that too. So I'm gonna give you the mic.
Yeah, and I think some of those experiences, so I see it can be polar opposite, right? Like if we grew up poor with like our parents or caretaker saying, we don't have money. There's no money, or um we don't have money for that. Sometimes we grow up with that scarcity mindset of I don't have
Right.
money. Even if you have money, right? Even if you're making six figures or millions of dollars, right? Like you still have that scarcity mindset of I don't have money. Or completely opposite. You grow up and you're like, well, I didn't have money. Well, I have money now, whether it's borrowed money or not. Um, I'm going to buy whatever I want because growing up, I didn't get that luxury. And so that's very interesting because we can go to either spectrum of I grew up poor and you can get to the point it's a spectrum. So some people like hoard money and some people spend all their money and including money they don't have. And then there's in between. And so those that leads to having some limiting beliefs about money. And those beliefs start holding us back from achieving our potential, not just financial potential, but in other areas. And we don't realize it. And limiting beliefs can be like the thoughts of scarcity that I was talking about, or having certain beliefs about people who have money, who talk about money, or people who are wealthy, right? Like you hear about it, like more money, more problems. Like, yeah, or like evil people, rich people are evil, or so you hear those things, and those are things that we either hear directly from our parents, or we see it in their actions, or in our communities, or with our peers, or in our society. And it even leads to things like fear of success and sabotaging your opportunities. Um, and a lot of guilt too, especially when we're talking about um, immigrants and our parents who came to this country to give us a better life and the sacrifices that they made. So there's a lot of guilt, shame, and almost like we feel a responsibility to do better. So then it doesn't feel good when we don't feel like we are living up to that. Um, so I think that it's important to acknowledge that our mindset shapes what we do with money and our financial reality and the outcomes. And really, what we need to do is rewire how we think about money. And
You're speaking my language. I love that.
yes, and choose more intentional thoughts so that we can shift
Absolutely.
those emotions about money because
And do
every
different actions.
yes,
Yes.
exactly.
I said that's where the habits come in.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so if we can be more intentional, not just with our spending, but with our thoughts, um, and to provide ourselves with evidence that we can relate to money differently, which that's really important too, because then we start reshaping those those ways, those habits, because then we start doing different things and being like, I can save money and not just spend it. Oh, I can pay off the credit card and not just rebuild up that debt.
Yes, and doing that actually changes the neurochemistry inside of our brains, which is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And the neural pathways that we've built around those
yes,
other habits.
yes, yeah. The new ones start to become stronger. And one thing that I want to mention here too is like something that we do, and I do this with my clients too, but I want to highlight here we celebrate the wins, and the wins we were celebrating back in March are so different than the wins that we were celebrating this morning. I sent Yesenia an email this morning with the total amount, between what was it, my HYSA, my brokerage, and
Your
one
Roth,
more, my
your retirement.
yeah, and it was stunning. Like it was just amazing. But that money win is like what, 100 levels at level 100 versus the level, 2 when we first started. What were we celebrating back then? Do you remember? Let me see if I
Everything.
can remember.
Right. So it was, I think at first it was giving your money a job. Then it was
Yes.
reducing your credit card debt by whatever it was, right? Like being able to pay
Yeah.
more than the minimum towards your credit
Right.
card. Those were some of the wins.
Yes. And then when the credit card balance said 0, oh my gosh.
That was a
So relieved.
dance party.
That was a massive dance party. But the point here is that celebrating, taking a pause and really noticing your efforts that you're taking towards changing, because it's not, we're talking about it right now. And it's not that it's the easiest thing to do, right? It's effortful. It takes lots of awareness to be able to, and honesty with taking a look at, the bank statements and where you're spending money and how much you're spending and how much your income is and things like that. It's not the easiest of endeavors, but looking at it, being honest with yourself, celebrating those wins that are going to start off small, and that is okay. Um, that is so important because it helps build continuous awareness, I'd say, like what you were talking about, and being able to choose different.
Yeah, and it builds confidence, right? Because you start off with those little wins and you're like, "Oh, cool, I can do this." And then your wins get a little bigger. And then also those wins add up. All those little wins you had add up to the financial situation where you're at now. All the wins I had throughout my journey add up to the financial situation where I'm at now. It's not one single, like, it's not an overnight thing where you all of a sudden pay off all your debt and save up all your money. It's incremental. And so if you can celebrate those incremental wins, you start building the confidence and you start amassing the wins.
Mhm. Mhm. Love it. I love it. Oh, okay. I'm glad I have notes here, and I'm so glad I have them because there was something I wanted to talk about earlier, and I handed you the mic on purpose. But now let's circle back. Um, Sales. So, the whole marketing thing with sales, and like my brain loves a good sale. If I can get something, and like, let's talk about Fabletics, okay? To kind of give an example. I'm a VIP member, and usually I've been a VIP member for years. And I know that with every holiday, there's going to be like a 60% off sale. And so what I do is I will use my credit, like I'll actually save my credit because you can skip your credit every month. And that's what I usually do. But I'll let my credit run that month, and then I go that weekend that the holiday lands on, um, and I get, like, a ton of clothes, like, hundreds of dollars of cl I haven't done this in a while, I'm talking like I do it now, I used to do this. I would get hundreds of dollars worth of clothes, and, like, one time I paid, I think, like, 10 cents for everything between my credit and the sale and stuff, and it was just amazing, but, like, stuff like that, it still, I'm not gonna lie, it still gives me like, whoo, like rush of dopamine. But back then, like, it was so, so exciting. And that's how I would spend a lot of my money and get into that debt that I was talking about earlier, is a good sale. And so, what all that to say, um, I would like to talk a little bit about the difference between buying something because it's on sale, especially now that we're around the holidays and, with the new year, there's probably going to be New Year sales. So the difference between a quote unquote good sale and buying something because it's valuable to us.
Yeah, so I think that's really important because that's a mindset that I've had to work on personally. Like I said, I was good at saving and all that. But one thing growing up and growing up so poor was that once we were out of just buying secondhand things, the only things we could afford were things that were on sale. So I found myself, you know, it was a way to make my money stretch when I didn't have a lot of it. But even whenever I was in a better financial situation, I found myself buying things because they were on a great sale, not because I loved them or because I was going to use them or because they were good quality things. I was on the hunt for the cheapest thing. And that led me to accumulating way too many things. And I didn't realize how many things I had until there was one year, I think the year I graduated from college, I moved multiple times. And I didn't think of that as that was just the norm, right? You bought things on sale and you bought two or three of them if they were extra cheap. And I think now I have a different way of evaluating. Yes, I still look for sales. Like I still have the belief that if I'm gonna buy something, and there's a potential to get it at a discount, why would I pay full price? But it's not buying things because they're on sale, because it's not really a savings if you're buying something because it was on sale and you never intended to buy it.
Right, then you just wasted even if it's $10 for, like, something that's originally 30, $40, you didn't save $30, you wasted $10 on something that's just sitting there.
Yes, and
Uh
that's the other thing is you want the things that you're buying to bring value to your life and to be very intentional about the things you're buying, because if you're filling your house with a bunch of junk, right? And maybe it's good stuff, but if you're not using it, then your environment becomes one that's not helping you live your best life, where you're accumulating things to accumulate them.
Absolutely, and to tie in a little bit of mindset into that and, like, how our brain works into that, our brain keeps a mental, like, tab on everything that we own, um, subconsciously, like, it just like, there's a map in there, and, the more things we have, the more, like, load we're putting on our brain, and so the more clutter we have in our environment, the more clutter we have in our brain, and it's not functioning at its optimal at its best. And so, like, it all ties in, it's all connected.
And that's a great point. I never thought about that, but I did notice whenever I made a conscious decision to be more minimal, to be more intentional about what I brought into my home, and also regularly decluttering and assessing. I think also visually, because I had more clutter, it was harder to clean, and I felt more stressed out and more overwhelmed. So you a very good indicator of how I'm doing mentally is to look at my space. And if my space is cluttered and messy, it's probably cluttered and messy. So the connection that you just made is I I find that very fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, it blows my mind too. I love anything to do with the brain. Um, I am in the middle of moving. Like right now, we're kind of in between two places. And so when you said, you were moving a lot that one particular year and you just saw how much you have, that's me now. Like, and this place is bigger than my previous place. And so, but seeing everything in boxes and how the majority of these boxes are mine and not my husband's, it really is eye-opening, and I'm going through I did this a little bit when we were packing, where I was going through and whatever I didn't feel like I needed or wanted, I set it aside for either a donation or, um there's these groups on Facebook, what are they called? Buy Nothing? It's like your city name and then Buy Nothing, sell I don't know, something along those lines. I'll figure it out and put it in the show notes. Um, but basically people post things on there and, it's all free stuff, and so I was planning on, uploading a bunch of things because they're all in great condition. I just no longer need them or actually never needed them, but because I was, the way I was spending before, led me to have all these things. Um, and so that ties into now when we're going to the store and buying things that we do need, like I can't think of something off the top of my head, but buying something we do need for this particular place we're living in, I'm no longer like, oh, they have all the Christmas stuff out. Like, let me go see what new Christmas ornament I want. Because I just have like I'm not in the mindset of I want to go see what sale they have or I want to go see what, cute things they have. I'm noticing that I've spent so much money already on things that I do use, but also things that I'm not getting value out of. And it's definitely changing the way that I spend. And I think that that's, something worth celebrating too, is being able to go to a store and just buy the things on the list.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very valuable and very important, because whenever we're not feeling in control of our actions is when we start feeling anxiety about it and frazzled. But I think there's also value in, if you're spending responsibly, if you're taking care of your present and future needs, to have those, like freedom of going to the store and browsing and buying a few things.
Yeah.
Because that's still fun and that's still enjoyable, but within not the framework, not the mindset of, oh, I'm just gonna, do this every time I'm bored or every time I'm stressed or anxious, but more of an intentional, hey, I'm gonna go shopping with a friend, or I'm gonna go to a thrift shop and see what I can find. I'm feeling I want to change in style or a few pieces in my wardrobe. Like that's
The
still,
intention.
yeah,
Yes, I
yeah. The
like that.
intention is different, and also your financial needs are taken care of, and you have that essentially money to spend.
Right. Yeah. And that leads me to it's just I don't know, it's a connection that hopefully makes sense to everyone listening. But with doing every dollar has a job type of a thing,
Yeah.
sometimes when we're reviewing my money, I like to refer to it as bonus money. But what would you say like the average person would call that money?
Bonus money, like in terms of money you didn't spend that you had planned to spend, or
Oh, perfect. That's a great way to say it. So at the end of some months, there'll be money that I had intended to spend a certain way. Maybe it was, I don't know, groceries, or um, I was saving for something that was important to me last month that no longer is important to me this month. And so that I call that bonus money. And so previous me with the different mindset, um, would definitely go to a store and be like, all right, like, what are we getting?
what are we getting with this
And
bonus money?
yeah, it was this bonus money. And now it's more of um like what do I want to fund extra, like because every dollar does have a job, I'm now focusing on saving the majority of my income. And so it's whatever I had, like let's say to put numbers to things, let's say I had planned on saving $200 for a course, an online course that I want to take. And so now with this bonus money, I'm able to save $300 this month instead of $200. And so that's how I'm quote unquote spending my money these days and looking at my money these days. And
You're relating to money differently, but also now the fun is not so much as in like go buy this thing and get it and take it home and maybe use it or not, but it's like, how can I maximize my money? And so
yes,
investing and planning for future things versus that instant gratification of, oh, that shirt is cute, or that's a
right.
cute outfit that I can wear to X event. It's more about like, what do I want in my future to facilitate my life, right? Like what's going to help me
Absolutely.
in the future or help my family in the future. And so then your values, you're able to spend money in a way that aligns with your values that's not necessarily something materialistic.
That is where I wanted to go. Thank you very much. That is exactly what I wanted to talk about was um, aligning how we spend and like what our goals are um, with who we want to be and like the way we want to relate to our money. Um, our future, like when we first started talking, my goal was what? No debt.
Yeah.
I don't want to have any debt.
That was your only goal, really.
I was like, "Help me not have debt anymore, and my world will be rocked." And you were like, "Alright, but I'm gonna do so much more."
Oh. And I think the other thing with like when you're living your life in alignment with values, which includes spending your money in alignment with your values and your priorities, you you just feel better overall, and it's harder to be swayed. by the sales, by the price cuts, but what everyone around you is spending their money on, right? Because if you're very aware of your values and you're very committed to living a life where your values and your priorities come above everything else, then you can continue your path and your journey so that you can meet your financial goals. And an example of this in my life was when we were buying our fixer upper that I wrote hell no to in my notes. My friends were buying homes like the one I'm in now with a mortgage. And that's not to say a mortgage is not like buying homes cash is not for everyone. I do want to say that, and I should have probably said it earlier. But now, because of I had my values and my priorities and they were aligned to me. So that's not to say that they weren't living their life in alignment with their values and priorities, but my values and priorities at that time were different. And that's allowed me to now, I made some sacrifices at that time where now I am living in a home that I love, that, my husband and I picked every detail of it. And so in terms of if you're very aware of your values and your priorities, then you make decisions now that will essentially give you X returns, because then whenever you're very focused, you're not letting everything sway you in different directions. I wasn't like, oh, well, my friends are doing this. Now I need to do this. Like it's like keeping up with the Joneses, or how I say the Garcias. Like, it's not about that. It's about spending the money in a way that feels good for you, that makes sense for you and your financial goals.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to highlight something, that when we're in alignment with our values and how we're spending, it's not coming from a place of restriction or, a very closed mindset or a fixed mindset. It's like, this is exciting for me and I want to be saving this money with the intention of it's for this specific thing. A lot of people have been asking me, Jocelyn, what are you going to do when, like, for maternity leave? Because I'm an entrepreneur and and um and I can proudly say I'm saving for my own maternity leave. And I get to choose however long I want to take time off for. And that's not for everyone. And that might not be exciting for someone else. Um, but for me, that's so cool that I'm now in a position where that's in alignment, and with my goals, and it's possible for me to do. And I just realized that I haven't told the listeners that I am expecting a baby. So, little baby Rio will be born in May of 2024. And that's definitely impacted lots of my money goals. And I'm so grateful for the work that I have been doing with the essay, because it's put me in a position to be able to make empowering decisions that are in total alignment with my values. And I can move forward confidently, which is your mission. And so I will always keep telling you because I get so excited when people have such amazing missions, and to be able to witness your work in action makes me like so excited.
Makes me so happy too.
Yeah. So with all the talk about money and with the new year coming, I wanted to see if you had any tips for people who might have a financial goal on their list for 2024.
So I think three things, and they're not super exciting, but they're very helpful. One, assess, bring awareness to how you're spending your money. Two, start being intentional and planning for how you want to spend your money. And then once you have a system for that, then you can start thinking about planning ahead, planning ahead for future things. But that first step of awareness, it's very important to not sit in the awareness, because if you're just sitting there feeling bad about your past money decisions, it's not going to help you propel you forward. You want to use that as data and information for how you want to spend your money, right? Because even I call them, I guess, financial audits. Like, even though I know that I manage my money well, every once in a while I do a financial audit and say, where is my money really going? And you'll be surprised to find your money sometimes is going in places you like would rather than not. Or also you were spending money on something that was important to you at that time, and now you have different interests, different priorities, and your values are different. So I think it's important to, when you're bringing awareness, to have support, someone to confide in, and your own back, and knowing that this is information to inform how you want to move forward in the present and the future, and not something to be like, because when we're feeling bad, we think, and in our society, we're told a lot, like, like toughen up, like do better, but that doesn't actually help us do better. So it's about taking the information, and making decisions from there, with being, being more observant, and being more, observant, and not so judgmental.
Mm-hmm. Showing ourselves grace.
Yes, absolutely. And then you can move forward from a place of like, it's going to work out. I have my own back, and I have a plan, and I can do this.
Mm-hmm. Open to that growth.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing those tips. So I love asking everyone, especially guests, what thriving means to them. So Yese, what does thriving mean to you?
So thriving to me is about like living a meaningful and purposeful life, and living authentically, like being who you are, being authentically you. And like we've said over and over, living your life in alignment with your values, your priorities, and what's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I think also thriving isn't just like our individual success and our individual wellness, but also about uplifting others and bringing others up with us so that we can all thrive.
Yes.
And I think it's about personal growth and confidence, and finding more balance in our lives so we can focus on meaningful experiences. And so essentially living a purposeful life where we can be who we are, and bringing others up with us, either by inspiring them or by directly impacting their lives and helping them.
Oh, thank you. I love your definition of thriving, and I can say, being a witness to the way that you live, that you are thriving and you have been thriving, and I love watching you thrive. Thank you again for spending time with me and all the thriving listeners. If any thrivers out there want to connect with you and maybe, start working with you or whatever it might be, how can they do that? What do you have going on at this time?
So I hang out on Instagram. My handle is Yesenia Godoy. So YESEGODOY. Also, of course, my email, which is just yeseniagodoy.com. And right now, I'm doing one-on-one coaching, like I've done with Joss, to help people who are struggling with feeling like they're living paycheck to paycheck and with debt, and they want to not only get out of that situation, but also get to a place where they feel confident in making decisions from a place of empowerment, and also I love working with people who have open mindsets and who want to change and who are self-reflective. And so that's definitely something that we work on. Someone who's very open to working on those things, working on the thoughts and the limiting beliefs, because that's where our transformation happens, right? Is when we can address those thoughts and those limiting beliefs. In the new year, I am going to launch a group coaching program, and a course that will encompass all the things that I do in my one-on-one coaching, but adding and infusing that community where there's other people who are working on similar goals, going through similar things to help encourage us, because community is a huge part of I think us thriving and us feeling empowered is when we can be able to lean on other people and also celebrate wins and confide challenges. So those are the two areas where I'm focusing on, is on continuing to work with my one-on-one clients, but also creating a community where there's a bunch of us working on transforming our finances.
Yes, that sounds so powerful. And so, Thrivers, if you're listening and that sounds exciting to you, I'll also make sure to include her email and her Instagram handle in the show notes for you to easily have access to. Thank you for joining us today, and I will see you all soon. Thanks so much for listening to the Thriving Purposefully podcast. If you loved today's episode, do me a favor and share a screenshot of this episode on Instagram story and tag me, or leave a 5-star review for my podcast on Spotify or iTunes. Your support means a lot and helps share the thriving movement. Thanks again for hanging out with me, Thrivers. Go out there and make today your best day yet.